My name is Joe Pryor. I'm a consultant at Nolan Business Solutions. And I just want to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about Nolan's electronic payments module. For those of you who don't already know, electronic payments, it's a module that allows you to pay groups of suppliers directly from Dynamics GP. The way that it does this is it automatically generates an electronic file, and that file, when uploaded to your bank software, will act as an instruction for the bank to make the payments to those suppliers. It does involve some setup, which we'll look at today, but afterwards it's a fairly seamless process that will save your organisation a load of time and effort when it comes to performing payment runs out of GP. Okay, so I'm going to look first of all at the key benefits of electronic payments. Then I'll go on to look at the setup that's required. And then finally we'll have a look at the actual process of generating the bank file itself in GP. Okay, so key electronic payments, it easily integrates into the standard GP payments process. So once sort of an initial setup is done in GP, you don't have to be dealing with any sort of external applications. It's all self-contained within the product itself. It's a very easy product to use. In fact, you'll find that your standard payments process should not change at all. You just carry on working as normal, and the generation of the bank file will proceed in the background automatically. So from an end user and a training perspective, there's very little effort involved in adjusting to the new product. Also supports many different file formats. Each bank will have its own requirements in terms of the layout and content of the bank files. Typically these are going to be either text files or XML files, and these files can range from the very basic, the one line per transaction type files, to the very complex, the ones with the multiple headers, multiple footers and transaction lines. And we'll have a look at both of those in a moment. So the application itself is extremely flexible, and it will allow for the creation of virtually any bank file at all, including the SEPA formats, which are proving increasingly popular for any customers who do business in the European Union. I know from personal experience over the past couple of years, I would say around 50% of the bank files that I've worked on personally have been SEPA formats, so we've got plenty of good experience at Nolan's in that particular area. Also accommodates multiple bank formats in GP. So we've found that with the increasing complexity of the banking systems today, individual banks can have multiple different file formats for different types of transactions. So HSBC, for example, wouldn't have just the one bank format, they're going to have many. And they might also have different requirements per currency within the multi-currency environment. So again, multi-currency is something that's fully supported by the electronic payments module, so you should have no concerns on that account. At the same time, as a customer, you may bank with more than one financial institution. But if that's the case, then electronic payments can hold multiple file formats simultaneously. We can define formats specific to each and every one of your checkbooks, so essentially that's an unlimited number. Or we can have a default global format that sits at company level, and that would apply to all of your transactions within that company. Or we can have a combination of the two. So again, very flexible in terms of the number and the type of formats that we can hold within that company in GP. Easy to test and recreate the bank files before we commit them to the payments in GP. So before any payment gets committed in GP, i.e. before it gets posted into the ledgers, you have the opportunity, if you wish, to produce a pro forma bank file, almost like a test run, if you like. And this file can be used to be uploaded into the bank software. And where it's particularly useful, it allows us to validate supplier bank accounts before we do the final posting. So if there are any errors, perhaps the suppliers have just provided the wrong bank details, or maybe they've been keyed in incorrectly to GP. Well, if that's the case, then these errors will be highlighted during that initial upload. We can pause the payment, we can go back into GP, make whatever changes are required to those supplier files, and then re-upload. So that's how we can test the files. In terms of recreating bank files, if for any reason that there's a breakdown in the banking software, and it does happen when we do the uploads occasionally, or for some reason the bank file gets corrupted during that upload, we have an inbuilt routine that will allow you to regenerate those bank files, and you can do that as often as you wish. So what this safeguard means that you never have to worry about losing your bank files, and you can always recover those bank files without having to roll back any transactions in GP. It's a very easy process. Also maintains a unique bank files history. Because the bank file names are user-defined and not hard-coded, and because they're saved to specific user-defined locations, it gives us the opportunity to maintain a history of all the previous bank files that have been generated. It's not a case, as it is with some products, where the newest file overwrites the previous, meaning that you'd only ever have one file on record. It doesn't work that way. These files can also be date and time stamped, which again allows for an easy way for us to reference those files if we ever have to check back in the future for any reason. Okay, so that's the main benefits in GP before we actually generate a BACS file. Firstly, and maybe most importantly, we've got to create the bank file definition. Now, I won't lie to you here, this can be quite a technical operation, and we usually find that this is a task best performed by a resource at Nolan, usually a consultant or a developer. Again, depending on the requirements, we can create these files in different ways. We can complete them completely new from scratch, just working off the bank specifications, or if we've produced a similar file previously, then we could import a pre-existing file, at least as a starting point, and then we just make any amendments that are required afterwards. So that's the two methods that we would use to build these files. If any clients are feeling particularly adventurous and they want to have a go at creating one of these files themselves, maybe the less complicated ones, then we can also provide some training and instruction around the coding that's involved. So again, if there's something you might be interested in, just get in contact with us and we can arrange that for you. All right. Prompts. Generally speaking, the data mapping that's required for bank files comes from data that's held either against the checkbook record or against the supplier record in GP. Now, to make this data entry easier for you, we've designed a couple of additional user-defined screens where we can label certain non-standard fields. So we can label fields such as BIC and IBAN for your suppliers, or maybe routing number or supplier category or bank country, or virtually anything really. And as we'll see later, this opens up a wider range of possibilities from a mapping point of view when it comes to constructing the bank file definitions, simply because we've got all these extra files to work with and we can use for mapping purposes. From there we move on to the specific checkbook details. So we would have to enter any specific data held against the checkbook. This is data that we want to see reflected in those bank files, and we can map either to the standard GP field. So this might be held on the checkbook maintenance screen, maybe on the checkbook EFT bank maintenance screens, which are your standard windows. Or if we need to use any of these additional fields because the bank file is particularly complex, we can also use the range of new additional fields that we have at our disposal thanks to electronic payments on this checkbook user-defined screen. Similar to the checkbook, we want to do something similar on the creditor screen. So again, we can use a combination of the standard GP fields and those additional electronic payments fields that are added as part of the product. We've also got an additional window for suppliers where we have to put a text in the box that says electronic payments. What that's saying is that we want this particular supplier to be included in the whole bank file process. So any supplier that's got a tick will be included in the payment run. Conversely to that, if for any reason there are suppliers that we want to exclude, maybe we don't yet have their bank details on file, or maybe they just have a separate payment arrangement, then we would just leave that tick box blank, and those files would be excluded from the run. Okay, final piece of setup is that we want to set up the output file. So what's the file going to be called and where's it going to go? So we want to name the bank file and we want to set up an output location. On this slide we can see that there are two locations in GP where this can be done. So either on the checkbook itself, so this would be an output file for any payments coming out of that one individual checkbook, or we can go globally and then set it for the company that we're working in ourselves. So this would apply to all transactions within the company. Again, we can use a combination of the two if we wish. And if you look at the examples on the slide here on the checkbook, you can see that I've set up a file directory that's going to see temp backs output. So that's where I want the file to go to. The file is going to be called RBS. It's going to have a number against it. That number is going to be the sequence number that's held over here. It's got, I've got the timestamp file ticked, so it's going to be date and timestamped. And because it's got the file extension of .txt, that tells me it's going to be a text file that gets generated. At company level, similar setup. I've named the company as Fabricam because it's coming company-wide, and it's got a .xml tag, which tells me that it's actually an XML file that's going to be created. It's the priority payment, which is a separate format. So we can see once again different formats, different file types, all set up in different locations to give you that added flexibility. The setup that's required. Let's open up GP quickly and we'll have a look at all of this in action. So bear with me for a second. Okay, so this is my GP. Before I go on to actually making the payments, there's a couple of things I want to show you. Let's have a look at these bank files first. Go to the form, and I'll show you basic and a complex bank file. So the RBS file, at the format definition, straight away I can see that the file structure is a single line. If I go into the detail of that line, I see that it's long, and within that line it's broken up into different segments with different mappings. So position 1 is going to pick up the EFT bank code, and then position 7 picks up the bank account number, and there's various other mappings that we can see dotted throughout that individual line. There's also a couple of hard-coded values. I can see that position 15 is going to be a 0, position 16 will be 99, so 099 is going to appear on every bank file that gets generated using this RBS format. So let's have a look at what one of these files look like. I'll go to my and I'll click on. So we can see here that, well, this is a pretty small file. There's 2 lines to it, so that tells me that 2 suppliers are being paid because it's 1 line per supplier. Supplier name, travel company, advanced office systems. I can see the date of the batch. I can see the payment details, company name, and over on the left here I can see my sort code, account number, and I could even see the 099 hard-coded value that we were just talking about. All right, so that's one of our very basic output files. Compare a set. I'll go priority payment. So in one of these files, so we've got all devoted just to the file with files at the bottom. At the bottom, so we can see straight away this is a far more detailed output file. We see Okay, and again you can see that the look and feel of the output is radically different. XML format, meaning that all the data is held within these tags, so opening and closing tags, so these are all in brown, and all the values in black are the data that's either been hard-coded onto the file or been mapped to data held in GP. So I can see things like number of transactions, one, unique identifier for the company, you can see the company name, Fabricam, I can see all of the lines of the addresses, not just the name. I move further down to the try and see my creditor name and all the lines of the addresses of that creditor. I can see the US dollars and the amount, so it's 11 US dollars. So without getting into too much detail here, you can see that obviously there's a lot more work involved in constructing one of these bank files and testing the bank files to make sure that they're up to scratch and to be confident that they're going to upload successfully to the bank. So that's the two different types of files that we use. So, and that's why certainly with the SEPA formats, if we are going to be working with these formats, we would advise some assistance from Nolan. That's the bank checkbook setup. So, UK. There are bank account number and bank code, so these values are all useful when it comes to generating the BACS file and including that data in the file itself. If we go national field, we have this EP user-defined prompts we set up before, so we've got sort code, account number, bank country, BIC and IBAN, and so on. So again, these are all useful, interesting information, particularly when we do the SEPA formats. One other thing I want to look at on particular checkbook, checkbook BACS setup. It has its for the checkbook, so it's RBS. So we've saw it before in the previous slide. It's going to go to C temp BACS output. It's going to create a text file called RBS. Next sequence number will be 16, and it's going to have the time and date stamp. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to check this every time. This is a one-off. This is a one-off setup. Just for the purpose of the demo, we'll have a look at this. Have a look at the creditors that we're going to pay as well, or one. So again, just like the suppliers, we can use standard GP fields to map to, or I've got a routing number, I've got a BIC and an IBAN value. The electronic payments flag, which is very important to make sure it's ticked, it is, so that's all good. That tells me that this supplier can be included in the payment run. That's all done. I'm happy with that, and now I can go on and actually do the payment run and generate the BACS file. This point forward, like I say, it's really just following the standard payment processes in GP. So I'll go to my payment screen. I'm going to create a batch, call it JP2105. Do you want to add this batch? Yes, select the checkbook that I'm paying out of. It's going to be ABS UK. The payment method of EFT, because that's what we're doing, electronic file transfer. Say that. And then I'm just going to select some vendor and invoices to pay. So I'll select Ace Travel. I'll just plug in there as well. All right, so I'm going to keep this pretty small for the demo, but obviously your batch can be as big as you want it to be. So from here, I click on Process. Familiar with the payment runs will be aware of all of these screens. Normally at this stage when we do a normal payment run, we would check that the separate remittance has been ticked and then click on process. But this time around, I want to create one of those pro forma files. I want to do a test on the bank. So the way that I do that is I pause at this stage. I go to additional and I do product pro forma. Tells me the payment file has been created. So this is just a test payment file, remember. Save to that. Pro forms create. Leave my screen as it is and I'll go to that I generated. Let's have a look. So we've got the 2 lines as expected. I've got suppliers that I expect. I've got the sort code and account number. There's a bit of a gap here, but I expect that to be a gap because that's where the payment information is held. We haven't actually paid the file yet, so that's why that would be blank. So I would take that file, upload it to the bank software, providing we get approval from the bank saying that all those details are correct, I can then continue with the payment run. Again, this is an optional step. You don't have to do this. So let's we print off the remittance here screen. Suppliers that I want to pay and the 2 payments, so that would be printed or emailed, or we do whatever we would normally do with our check remittances. Next step would be the posting of the payment. So this is the point at which we post the payments into the GP tables, but at the same time we generate the final BACS file that we want to upload to the bank. So I'll click on process. Tells me that the payment file has been created. It's the same name as before, RBS 016. It's got the time and date stamp. So okay, happy with that. Complete. Back into my the final file. Again, that all looks good. It's got the 2 lines as before. It's now got the payment information. EFT 32, EFT 33. It's the file that's been used, and that's the one that I will take to the banking software and upload it. Because I've done the test previously, I'm fairly confident that this will upload without any problem at all. To generate a BACS file, it's all dependent upon the setup that you do before, and then from that point it's just your normal standard payment process, and it will create that BACS file for you in the background automatically. Okay, so finished. I want one more thing, and that's how to recreate that file. So corrupted, let's say so mass panic, thinking that we have to roll back payments and redo the transactions again. No worries at all. I can just regenerate that BACS file from the routine in the purchase. So I've got to purchase payments, recreate the export file, we'll give me a file that I want to recreate, and it's going to be RBS 16. If I click on process, regenerates the file, puts it back in the original location. I do have the option, if I want, if I can repoint it to another location and give it another file name, I can do that too. But I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to process. And give me that CTEMP BACS output. RBS 16 has been created again. That's all good. Back into my location, and there we go.